Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by a legendary coach. This is Mickey Wender. Mickey is the head men's and women's swimming and diving coach at CMU, which is Colorado Mesa University. And Mickey, we're so happy to have you on.
Seamus, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. It really is. I'm still riding high off the NCAAs, and so I'm excited to have this outlet just to sort of think out loud about our week and the meet, and maybe answer any questions you have. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, great. Well, let's start there. So, talk to us about the NCAA Division II championships, what you saw from your team, and some overall highlights, because we just talked off air, and your teams did phenomenally well, placed third place on both the men's and women's side. And so talk to us about some highlights and what you saw as a coach.
I'd say the highlight for sure was the team, was the energy, the focus, the passion, the support that they had for each other. One of my core values is to build a team of significance, something that these young men and women will remember forever. And they created an experience this last week that was nothing short of phenomenal. The energy on deck, the presence, the support. You have a vision for what you want your team to be, and how you sort of see them coming together both in and out of the pool at the very end of the season. And it's never perfect in the water. All the swims it's never exactly what you hoped for. But in terms of our collective presence as a team, Seamus, I couldn't be more thrilled and excited. Our men went from 9th to 3rd, which is very satisfying. And our women, we may, I don't know if we'll get into the transfer portal, but we lost one of the best swimmers, not just in Colorado Mesa history, but in swimming history. And I won't get into the reasons why this young lady transferred to another team and did very well for herself. But we lost our biggest point scorer, and we're able to stay 3rd, which was, again, felt really good. Very, very satisfying. I would say, just highlights was our fight, was our determination. If someone's going to come and swim for Colorado Mesa University, they need 3 things. One is ambition. That's the most important thing to me. Even though I've got a master's degree in sports psychology, I can't make people want to do the absurd amount of work that's required to be great in swimming. And their ambition, we wanted to bring home wood, right? That's always the goal when you go to NCAAs. They have these beautiful giant trophies, just like you see on March Madness and the NCAA, and top 4 get one. And that it's always been pretty thrilling. Even from my days back at UC Santa Cruz D3, to get those wooden trophies that your mom will put on the mantle and will be a fixture in your home for the rest of your life is pretty great motivation. And so we accomplished that. And we said, is top 4 really the podium? I don't know. So we sort of set our goals top 3, and we were able to get there. Tampa and Nova on the women's side were loaded with talent. I don't know that we could have, even on our very best day, been top 2. Ben Hewitt at Nova's, he's one of Jim Steen's former coaches, and has created a really legendary 4 in a row. Can't argue that. They've won 4 in a row. And Tampa, they're amazing recruiters, and I give them a lot of credit. On the men's side, you've got Drury, coached by Brian Reynolds. He's been there 41 years. He's won 30-something NCAA titles. He's an icon. And to challenge him, actually, for the first time to beat them on the women's side felt pretty good. I have a lot of respect for Coach Reynolds. And and that Tampa team was loaded. They just had a lot of talent, and they went 117 mid in that 4
2
by
free
50
relay.
free relay on the
Yeah,
outside lane. Yeah, and they beat us by 1/100th of a
I
second,
saw that.
Seamus. We
I
were
saw that.
we were runners up in so many races, and it just goes to show. This is the first time in a lot of years we haven't won any races, but
Mm.
that's okay. That's okay. We're runner up in women's 3 meter, men's 1 meter 200, breaststroke on the women's, the men's 100 freestyle, the 800 free relay, the 4 by 50. We were the bridesmaids all meet. I never got to go to the podium once, but it's okay. The joy, the love that our team had. I'll tell you a quick story. Should I go on about this or?
Yeah. Give us
This
a quick. Give us a quick story. Give us a quick
you
story.
never know what kind of team you're going to have, and our men came out of the gates this year sluggish, to say the least, and we were not performing in both training or competition the way we were capable of. And we had an experience over on the Front Range, that's Denver metro area. We were at a meet, and Seamus, I'll say almost an all-time low for our performance on the road as a Wender coach team. I was really disappointed, and brought the men's team. It was just a men's meet, and I brought them in the locker room. And Seamus, I was as hard on them as I've been on any team in 36 years as a college coach. I even told my wife, I said, I don't know how that's going to go. It could go one way or the other, but I gave them that sort of proverbial come to Jesus meeting, and they took it well. They took it really well, and we came back. I noticed a real improvement in our training and our focus, and just the intention and intensity every day. We had an invite at our pool in November. We host an invitation. Our goal there is to make cuts and to get as many people qualified for NC2As as we can early, so that we don't have to rest and shave for the conference meet. And we swam well, and we got, I think, 8 or 9 or maybe 10 guys qualified in November. And then a month later, we went to UNLV. It was 4 weeks later, and we've gone to this invite there every year. They've got a terrific program and well coached, and a lot of grit. We pride ourselves on we're different than most of the top teams in Division II, because we're a state college out in the middle of nowhere. Most of the top teams are Indy, Nova, Drury, Tampa, these small little private, well-funded schools. We're the opposite. We're a little state school, and the way it used to be, right? When I was at Cal State Northridge in the early 90s, and when all the Cal State schools were D2, that's what that meet was. When Ernie McGlisco was at Bakersfield, and Pete Hovland was at Chico State, and we had these battles, these state college kids fighting it out. And that's sort of, kind of what we aspire to be now. And so it was fun. It was fun. I forgot it. I even forgot what I was talking about. I went on and on. So anyway, refocus me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you said you had a short story, and then you started talking about how you had to refocus the guys early on in the season.
So we go to Vegas. Yeah, we go to Vegas, and our guys go toe to toe with everyone there for the first time ever. And we end up winning that meet. It's a 3-day invite, prelims, finals. We win by 300. And that, to me, was sort of the linchpin. We're going to be pretty good moving forward. And we had a great meet there. First time we won it. We came back, and our first meet second semester was at the University of Denver on their senior day. And we go into their place, all their friends and family in the stands, and we take it down to the last relay, and we beat them in the last relay for the first time ever. And then 3 weeks later, we go to BYU, and BYU was better than us. They're Big 12. They got some real talent. But Air Force and I, we have some great back and forth rivalries. And we go a 2-day meet. We go up, I think, 27 points at day 1. Points carry over to the next day. And day 2, Rob Clayton he's a great coach, and they come back on us. And and then go 1, 2, 3 in the diving. I think they go ahead. So again, it comes down to the last couple races,
Yeah.
and our guys pulled it off again, which was real good bragging rights, because now we could say we're the best team in Colorado, because we beat the D2s, and we beat Air Force, and we beat Denver. So that was good. And then going into RMAX, we were terrific. We didn't rest and shave 14 of our top people on the men's side and the women's side to focus on NCAAs, and we won our 8th Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference championship in a row. And then NCAAs was just fantastic. Even I don't know that I've ever felt this good without winning. And our team kept saying, we won third, and that felt good.
That's great. Were there go on real quick.
So one of our guys, Lucas Samsonov, finds this movie on the web called Borat. He thinks, and the guys think they find this amazing old treasure trove movie, and they watch it all together. And that sort of becomes the theme. In fact, the trophies became Pamela Anderson's. And we're going to, that's the whole theme of the movie. He's going hunting for Pamela Anderson. We go hunting for wood. And that song, that theme song, that silly sort of Eastern European theme song sort of became our theme song. And then if we ever got top seed, they'd play that song. And then our team would break out dancing and just having fun. And then the last night, so we go back to the hotel. I'll never forget this. This will be something I remember the rest of my career. And I give my little talk. All the parents, we had dinner. Parents meet us for cake and ice cream. It's like a tradition. And we're in the hotel area. And I give my little speech. And it's all love and happy. And I said, let's go do the dance. And let's bring the parents with us. And so we all went out into the parking lot with the big speaker. And we all, parents and administrators, everybody did the Borat dance together as a celebration after the meet. So it was just fun.
That's tremendous.
Just fun. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. No, that's tremendous. I think finding a theme for a season, for a team, is really powerful. It can really bring the team together if they have something to kind of like talk about and relish in. It makes me think how we were always referencing movies or different quotes or shows just to have some sort of connection throughout the season. I love that. That's great.
Seamus, isn't it amazing how in swimming in particular, we create experiences of significance that you remember Russ Yarworth and those teams at UMass Amherst and those guys as the best friends, the most unique, close experiences that you ever had. And it's a couple things, right? It's doing hard things together with other people. That's priceless. I learned that when I was at Army West Point, and I watched that with my son, who's getting ready to commission as a second lieutenant in the Army. When you do hard things together with other people, it creates bonds that are incredibly unique. And
totally.
And then these relationships, like I'm still, one of my best friends is my co-captain when I was in college. And these, I think what we're able to create as coaches, and especially if we're focused on love and relationships and building camaraderie and spirit and doing something special, that's the real joy of this whole thing. And that's the gift. It's like we created something this year, and I like to think I've been a head coach 34 years, and each of those teams was something that these kids will remember forever. They'll never forget the relationships. They'll be in each other's weddings and they'll be part of each other's lives forever. So really fun.
Yeah. Were there specific moments within the meet at NC2As that stand out in your mind? Like even certain conversations before a kid's going to go up for a race, or certain moments that were indicative of kind of what you're describing the season. Just
so many. I'm hesitant to. Here's one, but this wasn't this wasn't sort of a turning point moment. This was just a really cool moment. In the women's 1650 heats in the morning, now this is at the end of the meet, one of our swimmers is in the very last heat, so there's only 4 people racing. And our team, we had a big team at the meet, but I sent everybody home that was scoring points that night, so everybody that's done is still there. And we're on the side of the pool, and one of the things we do is we like to have fun cheering, especially for the distance races. So I was like, hey, let's do row the boat. So everybody lines up and they row, and then the swimmer sees them and they get a little bit inspired maybe. And Sydney, she looks around, and so it went from row the boat, and then we have a little guy, he's a 200 flyer, Nathan Noblespeace, and they lift up Nathan. And then she sees him up in the air, and then they lift him up, and he starts swimming, like in the air. And she
Oh
goes,
man.
Seamus, no joke. She went from 31.2 average 50s to 30.6, swam away from the field, like 31.2, and all of a sudden now she's holding 30.6s. She swims away and ends up 16th and is an All-America honorable mention forever. And that was just the teammates. So we always talk about how the deck matters and how everybody makes a difference, but I've never seen such like 31.2 to 30.6. That was
Such a difference.
tangible. I'll talk about that one forever. That was cool. I think it was just everything. Here's a story. It's sort of an omen. I felt like, wow, this is going to be a good one. I always like to travel early. So we left on Saturday morning early. We fly to Denver. We get to the airport, and we're going to fly to Louisville. And about 30 minutes before the flight's supposed to take off, they cancel the flight. And they say, we're not flying to Louisville. The plane's broken. And there's no plans. You like kind of, one of those, hey, figure it out. So I get on the phone with Shorts Travel. They're the best. I really have a lot of respect for the people there. It's like old time travel agent. We're used to call and you speak to an actual human being,
An actual person,
and they look on their computer and they help you. And that's how that is. It's great. And I have nothing but positive experiences with Shorts Travel. So anyway, I get on with Shorts Travel. We're walking around looking at the different flights. She says, go find the United ticket counter in the terminal. So I walk, I can't find it. And she said, well, walk back towards the original gate. It looks like there's some flights going to that area. And right next to where the flight's supposed to go to Louisville, there was a flight to Indianapolis. And we walk over to the gate agent. Hey, you got any extra seats? She said, yeah, how many in your party? I said, 39. She said, we've got enough seats. She said, what, do you want them? I said to Shorts Travel, do we want them? She said, yeah, you want them. I said, what about our baggage? She said, well, it's right downstairs. We'll just leave a little late. We'll load it on the airplane. No problem. So then I'm standing there still. I get on the phone with the bus company. I said, hey, we're supposed to fly to Indianapolis or to Louisville, but our flight was canceled. Can you get us in Indianapolis? Sure, no problem. We'll see you there when you land. And so I thought, wow, this is going to be a fun trip. Like, that was a good omen. In hindsight, it kind of was indicative of how the whole thing was going to go. It just smooth. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah. You can look back at that now as, the indication.
An
omen.
An omen.
That's great.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, there's so many ways to go with this, but I'm curious, like, going back, like your story, beginning as a coach and what that thought process was like. Who was Mickey as a swimmer, and then how did you make your entrance into coaching?
Mickey as a swimmer was slow but passionate and just loved it. And I loved my coaches. I loved playing hockey. Up until I started swimming late because I had an injury. I broke a bone in my back, and I couldn't do a lot of the land-based things. And the doctor said, you ought to try swimming. And I loved it. And just had an amazing career. My coaches were the people in every sport, were the people who I emulated, who I wanted to be like. And from a young age, I wanted to be a coach. From a young age, I thought, I want to build teams. I want to be part of something larger than myself. I can't imagine my life without people relying on me the way I relied on my coaches. And so I
Mm.
knew from early I was going to be a coach and a teacher. I didn't know what level. I got a exercise science degree and a teaching credential. And I was going to coach high school, and I went home. I was lucky. I got a job pretty quick, and I was back in my town. I was going to be a high school coach, club coach, a high school PE teacher, and stay working on the beach in the summertime. I was a lifeguard, and I loved it. I was working my way up through the chain of command, and I was going to be that guy that was there. The guys I looked up to, David Neary, the guys that ran the beach, the chief that they taught in the winter and worked the beach all summer and coached the team, and that was going to be my life. But I hated teaching. I just didn't like the fact. People ask you, give me a word that same letter as your first name that describes you, and I always use the word motivated. I can't help it. I'm overly motivated, maybe.
Yeah.
And the kids in high school PE class were not that. And I thought, I don't see myself spending my whole life doing this. So what do I do? Well, let's go coach college. That's where I had the best experience. What do you need to coach college? You need a master's degree. So what do I want to study? I thought I have a pretty good sense of how the body works, but the coaches that have made the biggest difference weren't necessarily the physiologists, the scientists. They were the people that taught me how to manage this part. So I went and got a master's in sports psych, and that was terrific. And I ended up going to Cal State Northridge, and so lucky that I landed with this guy, Pete Accardi. In fact, Pete, the Division II college, the swimming coach of the decade, had won 13 NCAA titles at Cal State Northridge. And I thought, I want to work for that guy. And I was my best friend and I at the time, actually my sister's first husband, he and I took a road trip to Buffalo, New York for the D2 NCAA championship in 1990 so I could meet Pete. And I went on the pool deck and I met him, and he hired me on the spot. He said, "You'll be my GA." And so that was a great investment and thrilling. And then I made that proverbial pilgrimage to Southern California to go get my master's degree and work for a great coach, a legend. And he gave me a place to live, gave me a master's team so I could earn enough money to live. And I, my club coach, Dave Alexander, believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I loved him. And I know he loved me, and I lost him to cancer. The world lost him. Pete, same, could not have been more generous with me. And we lost him to cancer. But I think about those guys. Every time I hear the national anthem, I think of my mom, who I lost young. I think of Dave, who taught me as a club swimmer. I think of Pete, who gave me my start, and without him, none of this would have happened. I think of this guy, Dr. Samuel J. Fries. We all know Sam Fries, and if you're one of Sam's guys, you were one of Sam's guys, and I was one of his guys, and he took me under his wing. And man, the mentorship stories I could tell you about what Sam taught me was unbelievable. He called me the day he died, and I still keep that voicemail on my phone. And yeah, it's just, and I think about Tony Lisa. I'll just mention one more.
Yeah.
Tony, I'll just tell you quick. So yeah, I'll keep on the progression. You were asking about my career. So I go to Northridge, have an amazing experience with Pete, and I decided I need to be a head coach, and that was hard because Pete wanted me to stay 2 more years so he could retire and I would take over the program. But I wanted to be a head coach, and I ended up getting hired at the University of California, Santa Cruz. One of the best decisions I ever made. I'm so glad I did, because that's where I met my wife, who, she and I met on the pool deck there at UCSC. She was still a student when I arrived, but she was a lifeguard, and we became friends. And now we're together, over 30 years, and have 4 children. And so that was great beginnings. And one of the things that I would very often go over to Stanford, right over the hill from UC Santa Cruz, and volunteer with Richard Quick and Skip Kenny. And I didn't know them super well, but they were amazing. And I have to imagine, Seamus, when the job came open at the University of Washington, Richard and Skip were they were the Olympic coaches. They were the iconic American ideal of swimming at Stanford. That back in the early 90s, all they did was win. And you know all the names from Dara Torres and Misty Hyman, Pablo Morales, you know, all the greats seem to have gone through Stanford back in that day. And
Right.
I don't know how or why, but I wanted to move up. You know, I had that itch. I'm a great coach, I think. And I somehow got hired to coach at the University of Washington. And I think my relationship with those guys must have helped, because I don't know why they would have hired a D2 or Division III coach to come into the Pac-10. And that was another thrilling thing. We had a lot of success at Santa Cruz. We had national champions and moved the program up from unranked to one of the top teams. I'll tell you quick, when I first got the job at UCSC, one of the first things I did was call Jim Steen, the iconic coach at Kenyon. And I just called him out of the blue. I got his number and I said, Coach, my goal is to beat you one day. What would you do if you were me? And Seamus, he spent over an hour on the phone with me. I still have the notes. Everything from training to recruiting to building team culture to how to set up your groups and how to utilize your coaches efficiently and all of that. He became a friend. I think I earned his respect that day. And we had a great run at the University of Washington. I learned so much there. 3 of my children were born in Seattle. And then Army called, and I got a call from Kevin Anderson, the athletic director, and he said, Coach, we heard about you. We're hiring a coach. Would you like to talk? I said, I'm thrilled that I grew up not far from there. It wasn't very long after 9/11. It just felt like, wow, a pretty cool opportunity. But I came home, I told my wife, I said, Army West Point called. She said, what's that? I said, well, it's the United States Military Academy. It's a school in New York on the Hudson River. She said, first of all, we're not going to a military academy. And second of all, we're not moving to New York. And so I called the guy back and I said, sir, thank you so much, but we just bought a new house and we're happy here in Seattle. I said, so, well, can we come talk to you? So Nate Pine, who's actually now the AD at Air Force, flew out. And he had a book with photos of the house. The job came with a house and where we would live in this neighborhood. They called it the Olympic Village, and the school was right there on post. And it was sort of an idyllic thing. And she said, okay, we'll go look at it. And we fly into West Point. It's July 4th weekend. So it's parades and fireworks.
Oh, I'm sure.
And they pulled out all the stops. And it was really great. We went to dinner with the AD and his wife, and then we come back to the iconic Thayer Hotel, and my wife's upstairs sleeping, and Kevin and I are having a drink, smoking cigars out. And it was like old school, Seamus. He takes a slip of paper out of his pocket and he hands it to me, and that was his offer. And I was very happy with it. And so I went up to my wife and I woke her up and I showed her the slip of paper, and she rolls her eyes and says, okay, we can do this. And so then we did, and we raised our children there, which was just
Wow.
the greatest blessing. That, it's like the 1950s where there's nobody locks their house. I'd literally leave the keys in the car. There was no crime. You talk about a gated community, right? There's armed guards at every gate.
Oh, yeah.
And, so I was able to give my children that kind of an upbringing, and it affected all of them in different ways. My son Luke, like I said, earned an ROTC scholarship to Syracuse. He'll graduate in May and commission as an infantry officer, and just was great. So and then you start thinking, okay, what's next? Where do you go? We loved it, but I'm getting older. Want to put down roots in a beautiful part of the world, and we love the mountains. We love sunny days. We love snowboarding and mountain biking, and talked to Tim Foster. Tim went to Kenyon. Tim was a swimmer. He was the president. He built this beautiful pool, and he was amazing and sold me on the vision that we could build something great here in Grand Junction with Colorado Mesa. And, you know, Seamus, every job seems like the perfect job at the time, and this one is the same. You know, I've had the D1 Pac-10 experience. I've scratched that itch, so to speak. And I'll tell you, you can't imagine, right? I'm a swimming nerd, and to go to my first head coaches meeting in the Pac-10 and sit down at the table with Richard Quick and Skip Kenny and Mark Schubert and Norton Thornton and Frank Bush and Terry McKeever and Cindy Gallagher and all of the iconic names, these people that I'd read about in Swimming World magazine. And now I literally have a seat at the table. In fact, I gave a talk at the college coaches convention, and I've made a graphic of the Last Supper, and I put all their different faces on the people sitting around the table, because that's what it felt like to me. It really did. So I've had that, and now I'm just having so much fun here and building teams. And, you know, I'm 59 years old. I feel like I got 6 or 7 more good ones in me, and I'm enjoying it more than I ever have, and I'm better at it than I've ever been. And so it's fun. It's really fun.
Do you feel that way? Like, as you've grown through coaching, and like you're saying, you feel better than you've had as a coach. Is that true? Because I feel like people reach, you know, like a prime of their, but like in coaching, it seems like, you know, people can either get really stagnant and then start to fall off, or their wisdom and like that enthusiasm stays as they get older. Like, how do you find that you're still better and better and better as a coach?
I don't know. I'll let you know if I ever hit that stagnant part. I haven't got there yet. I just, to me, you know, I've learned more about swimming from swimmers than anything else that I've done. And so I'm just curious, and you know, I just love it. I had this kid that I got to coach for the last year. His name's Guillaume Goot. He went 42-1 in the 100 free. I thought he was going to go 41. He was runner up in the 100. He went 42-1-7 twice. Like, and I've learned so much just at 59 years old from this kid. But, you know, he's an Olympian. He led off the French relay in Paris, so he's an experienced athlete. But I just cherish those relationships. You know, Olivia Hansen. We're going to get her on the national team for Sweden. And if we can get her to 2 minutes in the 200 freestyle, I'm learning so much, you know, how to train her as a miler to get her down. You know, she's got a resting heart rate. She does red. We use the color system in our training threshold work at 206 heart rate. So I'm learning about her. I'm learning about lactate. You know, we had this kid, Oscar Sawicki, who he went 1971 50 butterfly on our medley relay and produced 18 millimoles of lactate. Who can do that in a 50? So like, I'm learning so much about people and swimming, and no, I have no desire to stop. I'm really enjoying it. So I'll let you know if I stagnate.
Good. No, that's the best, you know, that's the best way to move through life, continue to learn.
It's the only way.
It's the only way. Yeah. So you mentioned some names. I want to go back to it. So like, as you were kind of a young coach moving through, you mentioned name like Dr. Sam Freeze and Richard Quick, and like learning from these guys, these like legends, having a seat at the table. What are some coaching tools and tips or things that you observed from these guys that you could take and apply to your coaching? Like, are there any specifics that you saw from Dr. Freeze or from Richard Quick when you were at Stanford that you were like, oh, that's something that I have to implement, or that's something that these guys do really well, and that's the reason that they have these names?
Yep. I think I'll tell a quick anecdote about Steve Kerr, the great Golden State Warriors coach. When they asked him just after he'd won his first NBA championship, right? And he was an amazing coach. He an amazing player, right? Played at the University of Arizona, then was on that iconic Chicago Bulls team with Michael and Scotty and Rodman, and he was the guy that took the shot. If you watch The Last Dance, every coach on here needs to watch that Netflix documentary, The Last Dance.
It's incredible.
I think I've watched it 5 times. It's incredible. But when questioned about, hey, Steve, what was the most important game that you won leading up to the championship? The NBA championship. But we said, that's easy, right? And everybody's thinking, well, it was when we beat the Lakers or whatever. He said it was the relationship game. And that is what every great coach, in my observation, they're focused on the relationship. They understand that it's not about the X's and O's so much, that you would never see a more enthusiastic coach than Richard Quick on the pool deck. He was the loudest cheerleader ever out. Maybe Steve Collins, the old great SMU coach, maybe was a little bit more than that. So my wife would tell me early, channel your inner Richard Quick, because he, every swim you could just see would live and die with these women. And Sam, same thing. I said earlier, if you were one of Sam's guys, you knew that you were one of Sam's guys. And that relationship was unbelievable. My favorite memory of Sam, I don't remember what year, but I think it was my 5th year in Army, because I was at the end of a contract. Or maybe it was 4. It was like a rollover deal. But I remember feeling stressed, like this is a contract year and we're going to swim Navy. And if you're a coach in Army and you beat Navy, you're a good coach. If you lose to Navy, you're a bad coach. And it had been like 30 years since Army had beaten Navy in swimming. And I thought, Seamus, I always feel like we're going to win. Going in NCAAs even, I thought, our men have a real shot. Like I always believe we can win this meet. And this is the way that it's going to happen. And I thought, this is our plan. I called it the path to 151, right? In a college dual meet, you got to get 151 points. How are we going to get those? And we got our butts kicked. We did it in Philly. We did it at this the old Croc Center, brand new Croc Center pool that was named after Coach Ellis, who, remember the PDR coach? They made a movie about him. Anyway, we have the meet. And I'm devastated, right? I have failed my family, I've failed my team, I've failed myself. We got our butts kicked and I can't sleep. And I'm out walking the streets in Philadelphia, places I've come to realize I never should have been walking at night, but I just couldn't sleep. And I was just waiting for Sam, because Sam said, I'm going to come see you on Friday. And he told me this way before. Now, he was coming for the Army-Navy football games. That's sort of an annual pilgrimage. Sam had gone to West Point for 2 years. I don't know if people know that, but so I don't know why he took an interest in me when I was a young coach. He brought me on the board of the College Swimming Coaches Association in like 1990. Why is this young kid on the board? Because Sam wanted me on the board. And then I'm at Army and he's teaching me, how to be great at Army. This is the idiosyncrasies. And then he said, I'm going to come see you. And Seamus, I couldn't wait to see him. And he shows up. And if you know Sam, he's in a big fur coat and he's got a bag, like a shopping bag of gifts for me. And he says, let's go talk. And we sit down in the coffee shop. And he said, this is what happened. And this is why. And this is what we're going to do about it. And we talked for about an hour. And I could take a deep breath, right? Okay, this is what happened, and this is why, and this is what we're going to do about it. And Seamus, true story, I walk out of the coffee shop into the lobby. I think it's the Crown Plaza Hotel. It's a beautiful host hotel for Army-Navy football, and we're staying there. And there's the whole entourage, the AD, all the executives from the University of Washington, and he sees me. And he walks over and he says, "Hey, big guy, rough night, huh?" And I said, "Yes, sir, but this is what happened, and this is what we're going to do about it." And he said, "You're my guy. I'm giving you another 5 years." And he shakes my hand and walks off and goes to do the football game. That's Sam, right? That's mentorship.
Wow.
Though, and that's not an accident. I don't think. I don't think that's an accident, right?
Mm-mm. No.
Those things are meant to happen. So, and there's
Mm.
countless stories like that. Through a long career, you just look back on those moments of, wow. But he believed in me, and consequently, he helped me believe in myself through those hard times, and
Mm.
we all have them. That's my
Yeah.
proudest thing. I've been able to be a head coach for 34 years in a row. It's not easy.
It's not. No, it's really not. So then talk to us about your like, because it seems like there's different like chapters here, like Washington and then Army and now at CMU. So how would you kind of like define the chapter of your experience at Washington? Because obviously that was getting a seat at the table. That was a bigger, you know, powerhouse Division I kind of team. And like you said, you weren't sure if you'd get a job like that if you didn't have these relationships and how important they were to put yourself out there. So what was that chapter like of your career at Washington?
It's a great question. I think as a lifelong athlete, locker room guy, athletics guy, it's sort of demystified what is big time athletics, right? I
Mm,
got a chance to see behind the curtain of, okay, this is big time, right? 2 years ago, they won the national championship in football with this iconic coach, Don James. There's money and prestige, and the job came with the car and all that stuff, right? So it gave me a chance to see that, and I'll be honest, it was fun, right? It was thrilling, and I got to go all over the world and go to Croatia and be on deck with Croatia at the World Championships because we had some Croatian swimmers that were doing well, and all that was cool. But I'll be honest, I got a little bit. Um, our football team at the time was going through transition, and
mm,
there's a book, it's called Scoreboard Baby, that I read later about the football team at the University of Washington, where we had 14 either accused or convicted felons on the team at that time, and one of them walked through my pool one day, our pool, and took his helmet. He had a temper tantrum and he smashed a hole in the sheetrock because he was
mm,
upset. And many times the football players would take a shortcut through the pool. And then when I went to the coaching staff, nothing was done about it. And it kind of got me a little bit questioning, a little bit bitter. And then I saw these things. I saw this guy, public news, Jeremy Stevens. He crashed his car into a nursing home, I think it was, and then started that next week for the
mm,
team. It was just kind of interesting. And then I saw these guys win the Rose Bowl and fly down and be on the Tonight Show and go party at the Playboy Mansion. And I thought, well, there's a little bit of a hypocrisy here. It wasn't what I thought it
yeah.
should be. And
Mm,
I maybe would have stayed there, if everything didn't work out the way it did with Army. But then you think
sure. Sure.
duty, honor, country, like, wow, this is prestige. And then that worked out amazingly well. And I still got to see fast swimming. We had a kid on the team at Army who was American Samoan by blood, and they picked him to be on their Olympic team. And then they picked me to be the head coach for American Samoa. So just because I was in Army didn't mean I wasn't around great swimming. In '08, I got to go to
Mm,
Beijing, China, and march in opening ceremonies in a skirt and be at all Phelps's gold medal swims and experience all that it
mm,
was thrilling. So yeah, you're right. It's sort
yeah.
of kind of chapters like that.
Mm, yeah. And then what about the move to okay, so then you go to Army, you take that opportunity and you're there from 2006 to 2019, right? So that's,
Yeah.
a healthy career at Army, what was that chapter like? Like, what were some things? Because you said the goal was to, beat Navy there. Obviously, that's a huge deal. But like, what did you learn? You talk about learning from the swimmers. What did you learn from the cadets and the swimmers and the type of people that walk through those doors, and how that maybe evolved your coaching, changed your coaching, and who you are as a person?
It was an incredible honor. It really was to live and work and be in that place. They talk about America's best and brightest, and I believe that to be true.
Mm,
To work with and for people who have made the choice to put our freedom, to stand in the gap between evil that exists in the world, and we know that it does, and freedom and this experiment in democracy that the United States is famous for. And it's young, right? We're this whole experiment and what the founding fathers sort of envisioned, it's only a couple hundred years old, and we don't know how it's going to play out. But there are brave people that signed up, and especially after 9/11, they knew they were going to fight the bad guys, and they chose this. And that was humbling. That was an amazing experience. One of the really cool things I got to do when I was at Army is they took me and the athletic director and the superintendent and the lacrosse coach, my best friend, to Baghdad. And we flew in, we spent a week, just over a week in the Middle East. And we were in, I think, a dozen different helicopters. We were in Kevlar and body armor, flying around and to Baghdad. And so we saw the whole thing, and we're in
mm,
these meetings with special forces, and so that glimpse into that world, I loved it. I would do anything. I got to drive a Bradley. I got to do the slide for life. They let me fire all these weapons. Like anytime there was an opportunity to experience the training, I would do it. And because
mm.
it's just so much fun. So I'm a patriotic person. I love our country. I was raised, that way. And I felt like in a small way, serving the people that will serve our country was meaningful, that I was doing
Mhm.
something that kind of mattered. And I loved it. I wish I could have done better against Navy. Um, but I really had a great experience.
Mm. Are there any stories or like moments from coaching your athletes or even at big time meets that stick out from your time in Army? Like these, just anecdotes, these stories of what that could have been like, or even
Well,
developments
that
people recommend.
I'll tell you, the Army Navy swim meet was. I still have never experienced anything quite like that
Mm,
level of intensity. And I think early I didn't handle it particularly well. That you get sucked into this winning losing mentality, and that's not what life is. That's not what swimming is. It's and so I learned from that. I think I'm still sort of learning and reflecting from that. The
mm,
brotherhood, the camaraderie of that team was extraordinary because of what they're doing, right? They've chosen the combat of arms, or the career of arms, to go out and fight for their country. And so I just, the graduations, the parades, those experiences, the perks of it. Every year we go on a training trip to Puerto Rico, and we'd take a C-130 or a C-17 cargo plane. We go to the airport, Stewart Airport in Newburgh, and the big Army plane would land, and we'd pull up with our supplies, and we'd even bring power towers, med balls, everything. They could fit tanks in the back of these planes, so we just load all our training gear in there. Then we would load in, and we'd fly to Puerto Rico. We'd land at Fort Buchanan, which was another Army facility down there. We'd stay on post, and those little things that never got old. And that trip to the Middle East was who gets to do combat, tourism like that? It was pretty cool. I loved all of it.
Yeah.
And the people I met there, the friends that I made there, still some of the best friends I've ever had. It was a real fraternity, that life, and I felt so lucky that the Army guys sort of invited me into that, and I loved it. And women, yeah.
Talk to us too about mentoring, like your assistants and people that are under you. How do you approach that as a head coach and like as a leader?
Very seriously. I take mentorship very seriously, and it's something that I love to do. In fact, if any young coach reaches out, I always return the call. I'll always return the email. I'll always schedule time, because I know how much that made a difference in my career. And I have many people that will call me on a regular basis, former coaches. I talked to Brett Lungard the other day. I gave him his first coaching job when I was at Army. He was our team captain at Washington, is now coaching the team at Kentucky. I saw Ricky Perkins, who I gave him the assistant job at Washington, and now he's at University of Sioux Falls. I talked to Brendan Bray very regularly. He swam for us at Washington, is now coaching Nevada Reno. Joe Dykstra is another one. He's at Seattle U. And so I just try to be available. I really like the CSCAA mentorship group. So I get to run a group of 5 of us, or 4 of us, I guess. We do monthly mentorship calls, and I think that's terrific. And I just try to be available. And I've got a call after this with another guy I used to coach, who's got some questions. So it's a hard life, and it's a wonderful life. But as almost 60, I sort of reflect back on, well, what are the things that a young coach needs to know to be able to do this for a whole career? I teach a course, Kinesiology 307, here at Colorado Mesa, called Philosophy and Psychology of Coaching. And one of the things that they have to do in order to be selected for the course is want to be a coach. And in that class, I have a whole semester where they go from soup to nuts, how to build a philosophy and a vision, how to build a budget, a schedule, fundraising, scheduling. And we go through the whole thing, and their final exam is they interview with me for a mythical job that you're trying to achieve. And so that's really cool. A passion of mine. I love mentoring young coaches, and would love to do it more, because I've made every mistake in the book, but I'm pretty proud of myself that I haven't made the same one twice. And if I could help a young coach learn from all the mistakes, and it's hard, and especially when we're young in our 20s, we think we know something, and then you sort of realize later, well, wow, I don't know. And I think that's the freedom. Once you kind of get out of that phase, and you can't force it, once you realize that you don't know, then that's where you really start to learn as a coach. And I think great coaches are always learning, always trying to get better, right? How to make the main thing every day. And I'm constantly learning about training and coaching and team, and the team. I'm in the spectrum of coaching. There's art and science, and I'm more on the art side of it. The team culture, that part to me is really interesting. And so my great associate head coach right now, Andy Perro, he's doing lactate testing, and he's got the heart rate monitors, and he says, hey, if our heart rates go here, we're out of this zone, so tone it down a little bit today, coach. And so I always learning from each other. I missed that at Army because they all had a job when they were going to graduate. They couldn't, because they're going to go be Army officers. But here at Mesa, we've got a great coaching major, and I have always 4, 5, 6 volunteer coaches that are just eager to learn and grow and make a career in it. And so I'm pouring as much into them as I can, and it gives us so much freedom. We've got a beautiful facility. We've got a 50-meter by 25-yard pool, so we got 21 training lanes every day.
Sure.
And our volunteer coaches, we're like I said, Seamus, we're a state college. We're the only thing fancy about our program is our facility. We have to fundraise $65,000 a year just for kickboards and pull buoys, and that's not to mention scholarships. I have 14.6 on the men. Everybody else in that top 10 is my understanding they're at over 8, and so I take a lot of pride in the fact that we're doing more with less, and these volunteer coaches broaden our reach every day. Every day, pretty cool.
Yeah. So I have this question based on a sponsor of the podcast, this company called SwimSmart, and it's a question on what does swimming smart mean to you?
I guess swimming smart means we make the main thing, right? So in terms of racing, what are the controllables, right? What are the specific skills, things that we know we can control inside a race, right? It's the obvious kick counts, stroke rate, breathing patterns, distance per stroke, energy management. So being really just diligent about managing the controllables in terms of race day. I think in training swimmers, what swimming smart means to me, at least now, is being very specific and intentional about the adaptations that we're shooting for in any particular session, so that we're discreet in not trying to do too much every day. I think you can do one main adaptation per training session. And that's the one thing that I'm learning more and more about how to coach, the physiology of coaching, and how to really dial that in specifically. I think Greg Troy tells a great story about coaching Ryan Lochte. If Ryan Lochte was doing 20 times 100s freestyle, he was so laser focused that it wasn't 20 100s freestyle. It was one perfect 100 in terms of kick counts and stroke rates and breathing patterns 20 times. And I think the great ones have that ability to be laser focused on the process and what does that mean for them, right? And being smart. I think there's this notion nowadays that less is more. And I think maybe that's true in certain situations, but I'm traditional, right? I believe that every athlete needs an aerobic base. I'm not old school, and we're not doing like Nort Thornton used to say, if we can do enough 100,000-yard weeks in a row and get to 1,000,000 yards by the end of first semester, then we know we can rest and swim fast second semester. Like, I'm not necessarily the volumetrics guy, but I do believe that aerobic training is very reliable. I think as you get better and more talent, that's where tech suits become more important. That's where that race, high-end race specificity yields greater return on investment with the higher caliber people. I think that sometimes we're mistaken when we see what Bob Bowman is doing or what the University of Virginia is doing, that's what's right for everybody. I think at a little bit lower level, the most reliable type of training is the stuff that we know will work. If you build a bigger motor, you're going to be better. Now, obviously, the vehicle has to be put together properly, right? I tell everybody, you choose every time you dive into the water, are you going to be a Lamborghini or are you going to be a beat up old Volkswagen Bug, right? Like technique matters. Streamlining matters. You can tell how good of a coach that program has, right? Because I get to go all over the country and watch club teams train. You can tell in 5 minutes when you walk into a program how well coached are these kids just by watching the way they come off the walls, right? Are they tight? Are they locked in? Are they jumping off the walls in short course? Are they at least attempting some dolphin kicks, you know, to develop that skill? But that's swimming smarter. So that's a long answer, but I don't know if I did it. But there you go.
That's good. No, that's good. Yeah.
Okay.
The longer answer is often a better answer. So, yeah.
I don't know if I agree. Oh, sorry. I didn't interrupt you.
No. Well, not always, but in this case, longer. No, not always. But in this case, you expanded on your initial thought, and actually the answer grew and it got better as you went. So, but what were you going to say?
I tell my coaches, coach like a caveman, right? Simplicity is the ultimate in sophistication. If you can say something in 5 words instead of 6, that's better. And so I challenge them to really think about their vocabulary, especially when it comes to making technique corrections. Because a young coach will stand there and will talk for 2 minutes, and a great coach will talk for 6 seconds and be a little bit more effective. So I always challenge them to make it as simple as they can.
Why is that?
People won't remember. We have a limited capacity to make change and to remember things. We can do simple things, but the complexity, it sounds good, and giving all the theory and all that is important. In fact, I'll say this, Seamus, to a young coach, I think what kids nowadays want to know is why, right? I think athletes, swimmers are amazing, right? Like Eddie Reese used to say, that they chose the hardest thing. Like, who chooses to get up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning and go dive into a cold pool? And the practices are always longer than you want them to be, and they're harder than you want them to be. But we keep coming back. Like, swimmers are unique people. They really are.
Yeah.
They chose this, and you don't get to play swimming. You know, it's inherently difficult, which is great in terms of life preparation, because so is life. It's difficult, and that's why we see this as a vehicle to teach life skills. It's something that makes us better every day. And so
I like that.
Again,
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going.
No, that's good. It was advice for young coaches. Yeah. And
here's my advice. Tell them before practice the goal of the practice, right? What specific adaptation are we shooting for today, right? If it's we're going to expand our aerobic capacity, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is what it might feel like, and this is your job today to manage these particular things inside the training, because this is what's going to happen, right? And try to, like I always try to break things down. You know, lactate tolerance. I tell them, there's these little guys in your muscle cells. There's balers who are scooping up the lactic acid and dumping it out into the bloodstream, and then there's buffers who are scooping up bicarbonate and dousing it on the acid, teaching us how to use lactate as fuel, and trying to get them to envision, okay, what's happening inside, even at a cellular level. I think is sort of fun for them to have an idea of, you know, my buffers and balers are getting stronger today. I think Mike Bottom used that years ago, and I just love that analogy. But so telling them why and how, and then they'll do it. If you pick the right people.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I'm trying to simplify my communication often with the kids that I coach, and that's very applicable to how I'm trying to communicate what we're doing. Because you're right, a lot of it's short-term memory. It's they're focused on being the athlete, getting in the water. But if you can communicate why we're doing what we're doing, what our expectations are from you, then you're often going to get a better performance and attitude out of your swimmers, and the communication will be aligned. So to me, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And challenge them on that every day. Like I have a
Yeah.
whole series of story. I'm a storyteller. So I tell a lot of stories to help them think about things in a different way, you know, how I need them to think about it. I'll tell you a quick story just about that, about process, about training. There was a French naturalist, a guy named Dr. Henry Fabre, and his field of study was caterpillars, in particular the processionary caterpillars. And he did a famous iconic study where he took a bunch of caterpillars and he lined them around a flower pot so they form one continuous circle, and they're genetically programmed to follow each other around in a circle. And in the center of the pot, he put a big pile of pine needles and water, which is the food source of the caterpillar. And they started walking around for 5, 6, 7 days. They followed each other around in a circle around this pot until they all literally died of starvation and exhaustion, right? They confused activity with accomplishment. They thought just by going around in a circle and following the person in front of them that they were getting better. They were killing themselves, Seamus, because they get confused. And it's a great analogy, obviously, for swimming. If you just dive in and you're just going around in a circle and following the feet in front of you, all you're doing is getting tired, right? This is really, so all those kinds of stories I think are really important.
Yeah, it makes me think of when you see a swimmer who is choosing to go at the back of the lane or the middle of the lane, even though we both know that they should be pushing themselves to lead the lane or to get more out of it rather than just following along and, you know, just kind of slugging their way through it because they don't want to move up. So yeah, I like that analogy. So Mickey, I'm coming up on my final question for you. Are you a fan of the get out swim? And if so, do you
Very
have
much so.
a memorable story? Because you're the storyteller.
Oh gosh, Seamus, get out swim story. I got to tell you, the first one that comes to mind has nothing to do with my coaching or swimming, but it was as a kid at Stony Brook University. John DeMarie was the iconic coach at Stony Brook. They had good teams, D3 teams back in the 80s. And Coach DeMarie had these rough kids. And we're, you know, that's us, right? I've always been at state colleges. I've never worked at a private school. I don't know what they're like, but I know what a state university is. I know what a public school's like. I know what we try to build: blue collar, gritty, tough kids. And Jimmy Dunleavy, he went on to become a New York City firefighter, was on that team. And he took a kickboard and he threw it across the pool and it went out the window. And little window, like not a big window. And Coach DeMarie said, Jimmy, if you can do that again, we're done. And this was at the beginning of practice. We won't have practice today. And Jimmy took the kickboard, Seamus, true story, threw it, it went out the window, and practice was over. It was unbelievable. My only, you know, we play follow the leader sometimes. That's an old Eddie Reese thing where they just follow each other around. And my only bad experience I'll let is we did follow the leader and the team left. They left practice. And they didn't come back. That was a low point of follow the leader. That was at Washington years ago. And they thought it was funny. And they came to my house later and apologized.
That's great.
So, yeah. But I love get out swims. I don't have one that's coming to mind, but I'm really good at predicting what people can do. I think all great coaches have a real sense of what their athletes are capable of. And so always with get out swims, I'll write the number on the board and they'll think, holy cow, and they'll typically beat it by a tenth. and then really surprise themselves. And so I like to do it with the whole team there, and line the deck and make it, emblematic of what the meets will come down to. If we're doing it right, if CMU is hitting it right, the national championship is going to come down to the 4x100 freestyle relay. This year, it came down to that to get third. One year, I know it's going to come down to that to win the meet, and I want them ready for that moment. And it's like psychologists, they use exposure therapy. I believe in that, right? If someone's an agoraphobic, can't go out of their house, the doctor would have them go out on the front porch and then come back inside. And then the next day, maybe stay out there a little bit longer and then come back. And maybe one day they get to the mailbox. Maybe one day they can walk all the way around. And so I try to expose us to hard things consistently so that we can manage the moment. And we were better at that this year than we've been. We can definitely be better. So yeah. Great title for your podcast.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. Mickey, thanks again for hopping on, and I really enjoyed talking to you, getting to know you, and hope to have you back on at some point, because there's a lot more I feel like we could cover. Obviously, this is more of the background and the journey and some of the lessons, but gosh, there are so many other topics we could cover, from recruiting to, there's a million ways to talk swimming. So training and all of that, but I appreciate the insight you shared for, giving stories, telling stories, and how you have shaped your coaching. And it's been a great conversation, though. Thank you, Mickey.
Seamus, thank you so much. I really have a lot of respect for what you're doing. It's inspiring. We need more people like you out there doing this stuff. You're adding value to our sport, and it's awesome. So I'm honored. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I do have to shout out Peter Solomon for connecting us. Great guy, great mentor. And Peter, thanks for putting this together.
Thank you. Seamus, isn't it funny how we make friends? I met Peter Solomon in the parade before the Canadian Ironman in Penticton, British Columbia in 1992. Really? And we've been great friends ever since. We hit it off, and heck, we've been on vacation together, and there's no reason that we should, other than that we share sort of a way of viewing the world. I love that man. So yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you guys came to be friends, because I didn't see how your paths would have crossed in the coaching world, but that's really cool. So it was before an Ironman race.
Yeah.
Wow.
We met, and then and then you're on deck together at the Nationals, and he's amazing. He's hiked the Appalachian Trail. Who does that? He's hiked the Appalachian Trail and ridden his bike across America. As a guy who aspires to be an endurance athlete, he's on a way another plane. So anyway, yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Incredible guy, incredible athlete. Yeah. But Mickey, thanks again, and hope to talk to you again at some point.
Thank you, Seamus.